All right, we are here with Mohak Shroff, who is one of not just the engineers, but one of the senior engineers at LinkedIn. We are talking about inspirational figures and inspiring stories. What kind of got you into working at LinkedIn?
Well, it's actually a funny story. I'd been at this company, this like enterprise software company for 8 years. And it was this remarkable learning experience. I had a ton of career growth, learned a lot from a lot of really amazing people, and then realized that I couldn't tell anybody about my job because whenever I started talking about what I built, like their eyes would glaze over as they went like enterprise software. What the heck is that? You're a doctor. Imagine being some like super esoteric like builder of some piece of technology inside a hospital, and then you go and tell your mom like, "Mom, this is what I did today," and they're like, "I don't know, what is that? Like, is that good, bad? I
Well,
can't
Mohak,
tell."
I'm a urologist, so I can't tell my mom about a lot of the stuff that I do. So
That's fair.
I
But
know
at
what you're
least you
saying.
can say I'm a doctor, man. I said I built software, and she'd go like, "What software?" I'm like, "Well, it's like this thing that helps you buy like indirect spend management." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" So I decided I wanted to do something meaningful. As a software engineer, one of the wonderful things about my field is you can apply software engineering like coding to so many different things, as you know. Like you could apply to the medical field, you could apply it to something else. And I decided that helping people connect to opportunity was actually something super meaningful. And so that's what brought me to LinkedIn, was the idea of being someplace where I could indulge kind of my technical side, build cool stuff, work with really smart people, but do it at a place that had a really meaningful purpose.
You are, I think, the VP of engineering. Please correct me if I had the title wrong.
Senior
But
VP. Hey, don't
senior
lose the
VP
S.
of
Don't lose the I
senior
earned that
VP of
S, man.
engineering.
I earned that S. The
Senior
hard-earned S.
VP of engineering. What exactly? You mentioned software and engineering. Like, we can't see the physical product, or can we? In this case,
I mean, well, you do if you use the app or the website. But no, you look like software engineering. You talk about building that bridge. Like, okay, you built that bridge. Like, somebody had to model that bridge. That modeling happened in software. You talked about the biomedical device. Like, there's actually a bunch of data that's collected that goes through a bunch of processing. That's all software. Like, software runs the world. I think people don't often recognize how many things are being run by software. Like the elevator system you're using is actually being run by a scheduling algorithm that decides what floor an elevator should be on when it's not in use, so it's most efficiently available when you need it. What I build, what I used to build, I don't build anymore thanks to the S. The S means you don't have to build anymore.
okay.
What I build is essentially the stuff that powers how work works. Like the beautiful thing about being at a place like LinkedIn is when you think about how professionals do their jobs, they're meeting other professionals, they're seeking knowledge from each other, they're learning from each other, they're connecting with each other to drive opportunity, to drive investment, find new jobs, learn new skills, grow their businesses. And as they do all of that, they're using LinkedIn. So, we often talk about ourselves as like once upon a time, we'd say we were seeking to model the global economy, the way the world works. And now we talk about how we're actually becoming part of the kind of the engine that powers the global economy. And lots of companies and lots of professionals, lots of people, just people across the world of work, all around the world, use LinkedIn to power the way they work.
Now, I'm sure the journey to get that S was not easy. I heard your roots were in Austin. Now you're in
Mhm.
Silicon Valley.
Silicon
I'm
Valley. So it's not Silicon. Different.
Silicon
One's,
Valley.
one's a plastic and the other's an element.
Well, maybe
As a
one day.
as a scientist, I expect you knew that, but
Well,
lowering the bar, man.
I'm learning. So, when you hire me as your chief medical officer over there at your company,
There you go.
maybe I'll learn how to actually say the words. But, all jokes aside, earning that getting that title or getting to a certain point in your career is hard. I'm sure it hasn't been easy. Do you mind kind of sharing some of the bumps that you've had in the road, and, how were you able to kind of get past those hurdles so that you just kept moving forward?
So I mean, jokes aside, like the earning the S, it's hard for me to reflect on like, oh, it was this like hard journey where like I had to like survive all the stuff that happened. Like actually, what I've been really fortunate for, and something that I always tell people that it's a really good idea to find is when you find something that you're passionate about and you apply yourself to it, like a set of things sort of naturally happen. Like one, passion brings out perseverance and effort. And so like I found this thing I'm really passionate about doing, and I just started to work really hard at it. And like that naturally I think gave me opportunities that wouldn't have been available to me in an environment where I wasn't working as hard or bringing as complete of myself to the task as I did here. I connected myself to the right mentors. And then most importantly, there was this fit between culture of like the company and like my values. And that's a really beautiful thing. Like, I always advise people, like as you think about career growth, to always think about ending up in a place where you can actually connect your personal values, like what the way you work, to the way the company works and what the company is looking for. Because when those two things mix, there's this like beautiful exponential curve of value that gets created. Where I came to a company there where my values, my goals, my ambitions were very closely aligned to those of the company. I met people who invested time into me, who helped me grow. Like, and like to be clear, there've been lots of instances of like things I've done where I was like, oh, I should probably be fired right now. There've been lots of those instances, but ultimately ending up in a place where people are rallying to help you succeed is really special. So there's a story I tell. One of my favorite stories about my time at LinkedIn. In 2010 or 11, like I was this like punk engineer, right? Like that's all I was an engineer at LinkedIn. We were a much smaller company, but I just entered the staff. I started reporting to our head of engineering at the time, and I was this guy who was like leading a team of like 5 or 6 people, and I was surrounded by people who had more work experience than I had life experience. Like they literally worked longer than I'd been alive. Some of them had managed longer than I'd like worked. Maybe some of them had managed since I'd been longer than I'd been able to like string together a sentence. So like really senior people. And I had a meeting one-on-one with this head of engineering, and he asked me like, "What's your career ambition?" And I say, "Hey man, like not today, but like at some point I'd love your job." And the guy goes,
You said that to him openly.
yeah, I mean, I was like, hey, someday, like, I gotta, like, when you're done with it, I would love if you gave it to me. And so I say that to him. So he, at his next staff meeting, says, of all of you, only one of you has ever said, you want my job. I'm like, please don't say me. Please don't say me. And the guy goes, Mohak, God, why me? So he names me, and there's people like murmurs in the room, as you can imagine. It was like, that guy? Like, what's wrong with him? But after the meeting, this guy, he was a very, very senior leader, actually the most senior leader at the company at that level in engineering, somebody who, he has a PhD, actually has 2 PhDs. I mean, this dude was like epic in every way. He invented the term data science, pulls me aside. He's like, hey, do you really want to be head of engineering? I'm like, yeah, that'd be kind of cool. He's like, do you realize that you were head of engineering, you'd be my boss? And I'm like, I hadn't thought of it that way, but now that you mention it, like, yeah, I guess I would be if you were still here, assuming, whenever that happens. And he's like, do you want to be my boss? I'm like, I'm not sure how to answer this, man. Like, this dude is like literally like, 15 years older than me, like way more like mature.
You're logging into LinkedIn, looking it up as, other job opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, this is over. I'm like, he's like, do you want to be my boss? And I'm like, well, I mean, I wouldn't mind it, I guess, like if that's something you'd be fine with. He's like, well, if you really want to be my boss one day, I'm going to start mentoring you today so you don't suck at it when it happens. This man coached and mentored me into being his manager. So let me tell you, like, I've known, hundreds, maybe thousands of companies. Like, I've worked with people at all seniorities across every industry. That doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. People that senior don't say, let me help you become my boss. I wouldn't be head of engineering today. I wouldn't be senior vice president of engineering at LinkedIn if not for the fact that this dude decided he was going to coach me into being his boss. And he did.
It's interesting you say that because in all these leadership books and, these videos that you watch, and especially a lot of posts on LinkedIn about this, is leaders are supposed to make their own leaders. Like they're supposed to find their replacement. But it seems like that's not really the case in reality. A lot of places. I
think people love to talk about it. They love to say it. And they do it too. It's like, hey, I'm going to coach you into being just as good a leader as me, but never quite my boss, right? Like you could be good. Like maybe you can be like next to me. Maybe like after I leave, you could take my leftovers, right? Or you can like succeed me. But the idea of like coaching somebody, like seeing in someone something and saying, you are good enough for me to work for you, is a truly unique thing. And for me, like, again, like we talked about values, like, like the spiritual values, like the sort of cultural values I have, like as a satsangi, as a follower of BAPS, like as like somebody who like, saw Pramukh Sai Maharaj and sees Mahan Sai Maharaj now and their values, like for me to see that, I'm like, that's what they're talking about. That's special. And I've experienced that constantly here. People saying things like, when I finally took this job, my predecessor went on to do something else, and he was telling our CEO, he's like, of all the people at the company, like Mohak's the one I would work for. he's like, you should put him in my role. This was our previous head of engineering. And again, like it's such a special thing to say about someone that you think so highly of them that you're willing to put your ego aside and say that like that's someone who I would work for. Like who does that? It's really special.
It's absolutely rare. And, interestingly, so now you are in that position where someone may say that to you. Maybe when they watch this, they will.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. What are like 2 or 3 tips that you would give anyone out there, not just at your company, but elsewhere, when it comes to being a good, effective leader? And what are some mentorship advice that maybe you've given already that you could share with us?
So probably the biggest thing I always share with leadership, and it goes back to this point, like it's so aligned to my values, to my bringing, my religious beliefs, spiritual beliefs, and like what I've experienced is the best leaders are like they come with this perspective of like, it can turn into a bit of a like random like tagline that's like people like it's like warm fuzzy like I'm a servant leader. Like no, like the servant leader, like you really think about what the word means. Your job is to serve. And so what that means is like, all right, as a leader, what am I trying to do? Well, it's like all these people don't work for me. I work for them. And so what I'm really trying to do as a leader is make them more effective. And it's actually really true. Like the best leaders are the ones who make other people more effective. Now they make other people more effective them by training them, by enabling them, by connecting them, but also by making decisions at the right time, by being decisive, by providing direction, by providing inspiration, by providing support. It's all of the above. But in the end, like if you really think of your job as being a servant leader, then honestly, like you're serving the cause, you're serving the mission of the company, you're serving your management chain, you're serving your reports. And in that process, I think actually having this like deeply sort of humble approach to leadership is, for me at least, I've seen it as being extremely powerful. Because what that leads to is you're not sitting around worried about, am I the smartest person around? You actually want to hire or surround yourself with people who are so much smarter than you that you're like, oh my goodness, now I'm learning something. But that takes real humility, and really that only comes around when you put yourself in this position of being like, it is my responsibility at LinkedIn. It is my responsibility to hire people who are so competent that I constantly wonder, why am I here? They're so much better than me. And it's my responsibility to ultimately end up with somebody I've realized, I've recognized, who I can say, that person, I should be working for them. They're that good. Because what that means is I leave the company in so much better shape than I ever found it.
A lot of the words you used remind me of like, some of the mentors I have, but I think we have a mutual mentor that's guided us in many different ways, previously Pramukh Swami Maharaj and now Man Swami Maharaj. What kind of role have those individuals played in being your mentor when it comes to your spiritual journey, life journey, and professional journey?
I've actually been very blessed, to your point, like both Pramukh Swami Maharaj and Mahant Swami Maharaj to have had and to continue to have their contact and kind of mentorship. I think the biggest thing is, seeing the great works that both of them have been able to accomplish through this deep, very authentic humility and attitude of servant leadership. Like whenever I think about servant leadership, it's actually a buzzword going around, the Valley now, like going around my industry now. And it's always funny because every time I hear it, like literally the picture that pops into my head is Mahant Swami Maharaj. Like it's like right there. And so seeing their lives, experiencing some of their leadership, like I've been fortunate, as you have, to be active in a lot of some of the events we've put together, and like to have gotten direct guidance from them, or to heard from them, or to work with them. And seeing the way that they lead, always really putting themselves in a position of serving, rather than of telling, of like managing. It's actually being a servant, being available to answer questions, to guide, deferring. Like this incredible incident I still remember back in 2000. Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Pramukh Swami Maharaj like didn't go to college. He really had this like formal education down to a very basic level. Now in 2000, we have this huge event in Georgia, in this tiny town called Perry, Georgia. One of the things we did was we actually had we wanted to showcase to him like the internet and all this cool stuff happening with technology. And
I was there, man. You're bringing back some great memories. Go ahead. Yeah.
And it's like we wanted to showcase to him all this stuff, like cool stuff going on with technology. And like this one kid, I remember, like we put a laptop in front of him, gave him a mouse, and this kid's trying to explain to this guy, like to Pramukh Swami Maharaj, like how to use this mouse. I'm like, Pramukh Sai Maharaj is like, oh yeah, really? Oh, so what do I do? Like, oh, I take this and I click it. Oh, it's so interesting. And then what? And I'm sitting there, like, at the time, I'm like, oh yeah, look, yeah, we're teaching this guy how to use this mouse. And like years later, now I look back on it and I go, what were we thinking? Like, this dude is meeting like world leaders. He's like running this like ridiculous organization of like millions of people around the world. He's like the person who ultimately inspired and helped make real Delhi Akshardham and a temple, the first like traditional stone temple outside of India in London, and all these beautiful mandirs in America. And I'm teaching him how to use a mouse, acting like I know something this guy doesn't.
Wait, that kid was you? Because you never
No, it
said
wasn't
you
me. But I'm just saying, like, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
I'm putting myself in the position of that kid. But then, like, I think about it and like, how amazing because I know that kid. I knew him well. I know him well, and I know how he felt after. He felt this like immense pride and like sense of like accomplishment that he had done something so meaningful in teaching Pramukh Sai Maharaj how to use this computer. And that really was Pramukh Sai Maharaj's greatness, that in that moment he could have said, kid, I got this. No, instead, it was this deep, authentic humility where it was so disarming and so empowering, where that kid now leaves going, I'm going to teach the world how to use computers because like I was able to teach Pramukh Sai Maharaj. And I think about that. I think about that like really simple lesson in this tiny moment. And I've had like so many of these tiny moments. And when I reflect on my journey at work, there's so many of these. There's so many instances where I'll be like, oh yeah, that was an instance where I should have done that. Like, thank goodness I saw Pramukh Sai Maharaj do that. Like, that was an instance where this happened. And I'm like, wow, like, I'm so glad that I observed Mahant Sai Maharaj doing this. Because now I was able to apply it myself. And I've been really fortunate, again, in this point of mentors, of having mentors who are able to bridge my religion, my spirituality into the professional world, despite having no connection to my spirituality, right? Like this one, our previous CEO would sit me down and talk about how like, he'd ask me something and I'd say something and he'd be like, oh, is that the kind of thing your guru would do? And I'm like, well, you don't know my guru. What are you talking about? And he's like, well, you've told me about him and the principles he has. And like, that's how we work as well. And so isn't that something you should be thoughtful of? I'm like,
you bring up a great point. Like, I don't think I appreciate the knowledge or the guidance that we've been given, even at work, when I show that humility, I show that servant leadership, like I'm able to connect the teams and integrate what I learned in my volunteer efforts into actually my professional life. Like, I don't think I appreciate it as enough. So you telling me this story makes me think like, man, I should really appreciate it more. And I'm sure you do on a daily basis as well.
Well, no, I think it's events like this that help, that transpire and remind me. But, it's also a case that like, I don't know that we give enough credit to how, whether we appreciate how much those lessons help us. We also don't give enough credit to how important those lessons are in the professional and corporate world. It's often easy to think about the corporate world as like the meme that popular media sets for us. It's like it's cutthroat, it's evil, it's all, and it can be. And this goes back to the point about aligning yourself to values. Like when you find a place that's so well aligned to your values, like you just thrive. And it turns out that the way you grow is through those same things that you thought were so unwelcome in the corporate world, where it's like a servant leadership. Like you win in the corporate world by being a servant. Like that's not what I thought happened. I thought you won by like putting people down and like stabbing people in the back. It's like, no, not really. Like not real growth. You don't win by politics. You win by actually wanting the entire team to win. You don't win by knocking people down. You win by like building them up. You win by being compassionate. All this stuff is like really actually the way the modern workplace
how important
works.
is it to maintain your identity? Is your identity something that you should be putting forth day one, from your application to your interview to your first day on the job and as it continues, or do you kind of slowly show everyone who you really are?
I have a story. I love stories. I've got a story about this. First day at LinkedIn. So I'm an engineer. There's only 2 people who started that day, that week. And every week we'd have a company all hands. And like back then, company all hands, like 200 people like crammed into a little like cafeteria space.
And where are you at now, numbers wise, just so for reference?
20,000 something.
20,000, okay.
Yeah, something like that. So 200 people crammed into this tiny space. And you do an intro. And so I'm like, you're supposed to introduce yourself, like what you're going to do at LinkedIn, your name, and then something people wouldn't know about you from your LinkedIn profile. So it's kind of like something that isn't just professional about you, not just like the educations you've had or the job you're doing, but something about you. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to talk about this like dot on my forehead, right? I walk into this room, 200 people, and I'm like, all right, everyone, my name is Mohak Shroff. I'm an engineer. I'm going to be working on ads. I'm really excited to be at LinkedIn. Something you wouldn't know about me from my LinkedIn profile is about this thing on my face. Like, you're going to see me, walking through the halls, and you'll wonder, like, what is that thing on his face? And you'll point, and some of you will wonder, but you won't really have the courage to ask because it's an uncomfortable thing to talk about. So I just wanted right now in front of everyone to address this. Their glasses, all right? I'm nearsighted. It's not polite to point at people who can't see clearly. That's not okay. And obviously, like, I'm talking about like the fact that I've got this Tilak channel on my forehead, but I want to deflect because, to your point, the idea that I'd come into work with something that is so obvious, like so obviously a mark of identity, but then I'd stand out too much. Like, I was like, on one hand, like kind of turning it into a joke, like deflecting it. On the other hand, I'm like, oh, I've addressed it. Great. Nobody's going to ask me now. But as I reflect on my journey, the moments where I've experienced the greatest growth, the greatest progress, and the greatest sort of joy of work. And so when I was myself, probably the top line advice I give everyone when they ask me about how, like, I mentor a lot of youth about what to do with work. And like, the number one thing I'll always tell them is find a place that lets you be you, and then be you. Be the best you, because
So
that's
you
what you're
mentioned
best
youth.
at.
You mentor a lot of youths. We have the Festival of Inspirations happening, and you mentioned Daily Akshardham earlier. We have Akshardham North America opening in Robbinsville, New Jersey. What would you tell a kid that's there, you're mentoring, about why they should go visit this place when it opens officially in the future here?
Yeah, I think that the world needs more of the values that Akshardham represents. When you think about the values of peace, cooperation, core family values, values of sacrifice and service, that like all have been like poured into what ultimately stands as a gorgeous structure, but really like that structure resonates, emanates those values. You feel them when you're there, in every piece of it, in every part of it, in every area of it. And when you reflect on those values, like, you recognize that the world needs more of that. Like, when you think about the state of our country, like, how much better off would we be if people just took a moment to understand each other, whatever their views on whatever topic. Like, if people just spent more time understanding each other, giving each other the benefit of the doubt, seeing each other as someone to be loved because of the good inside of all of us, because of the God inside of all of us, the Lord inside of all of us, the divinity inside of all of us. If people had that, like, how much better a world would it be? And so my advice to youth is, like, I've felt that. I've hopefully gained some of those values, some inkling of those values, and I credit 100% of my success, my growth, and my, like, mental health, I guess, even, right, on the fact that, like, I find myself able to thrive because of all these values over the years. And so don't miss out on this opportunity to gain some of that yourselves. It is hard to understate. It is hard to overstate just how ridiculously valuable these values will be throughout your entire life, in every aspect of everything you do.
So Mohak Bhai, one more question here. So you mentioned values and being able to balance and family and professional life. The natural thought is, man, big executive, big company, professional life is number one priority probably for him, probably works 20 hours a day and then is home a little bit and probably doesn't see their family as much. How much have your spiritual values or having that foundation kind of helped guide you in that optimal, I don't want to call it work-life balance, but being able to prioritize what's important to you at the end of the day?
I am blessed that I don't feel like work is a prioritization against life and values. Like, I feel like I'm actually doing the thing that is aligned with my, like, values. Like, I'm creating opportunity in the world. Like, I really, really see, LinkedIn is a very special company. We talk about, as a company, with the desire to do good and do well. So, like, as a company, like, you have an obligation to do well. You do well for your employees, you do well for your shareholders, you do well for all the stakeholders. But then we actually do good. And, like, fundamentally what we do in the world is good. And so it's actually a very special place to be, very aligned with my values. But I think, sort of honing in on your point, there's a bunch of stuff that I want to do that is also doing good for me. I want to spend time with my family. I have two little girls, a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old. I want to spend time with them. I want to make sure that, I'm as much a part of their life as my parents were of mine, or have been of mine. I want to make sure that I'm able to stay connected to the mandir, to stay connected to a place like Akshardham, to be able to provide, to do service there, to be able to be part of that project, to be part of that experience. And so all of that takes time. And so I think the way I just think about it is like there is one whole of myself, and that whole, like, there's only so much of it, like, that I can keep on. There's only so much time within that whole that I can spend. And I think about all the things that are important to me, and I make sure that I make time for all the things that are important to me, which requires ruthless prioritization. You just start to end up being kind of ruthless about, like, what are the places where I can create meaningful value, where I'm not just sitting and, like, saying I'm doing things that are valuable, which, by the way, is as true at work as it is at home, as it is anywhere else. And I'm doing things that are, like, meaningfully valuable for me, for the world, like where I'm creating value back into the world. And those are the things I prioritize. So at home, it's like going home early just so I can sit on the couch and watch TV, not valuable. Like, we're not creating any real family bonding moments. But going home so we can play board games and, like, spend time talking, like doing ghar sabha, incredibly valuable, right? Going to mandir so I can, like, just hang out and, like, gossip with a bunch of people, like, not cool. Like, but going to mandir to, like, listen to, like, incredible, like, katha, to learn and grow, or to do seva, like, serve, that's, like, valuable for me. Even, like, build community and play basketball with, like, people who I've known for years. Like,
You
that's
play
valuable.
basketball, Mohak?
On record, I'll say yes. Don't ask, but you're not allowed to ask anybody if that's actually true. Yes, I do. I try to. But you know what I mean? Like, it's like actually finding ways to make sure that the time you're spending is time spent actually doing things that are valuable, not like I'm at work and I'm just, like, walking the halls and, like, eating snacks and, like, sitting at my computer, not really doing anything. It's like, all right, look, if I hit a wall, great. Time to switch gears, time to go home, spend time with my girls, spend time with my family. But if we're at home, we're not going to watch TV, which is, like, wasting time. If I'm, hanging out with my wife, like, we're talking about something. We're talking about, like, our daughters and how we raise them, or, like, school, or her job, or my job, and stuff like that. And, like, finding ways to make sure that every moment is spent maximizing the value that I can drive from it. That's the way I create balance.
So last question here, Mohak. So who invented the phrase ruthless prioritization? Was it you or your brother? Because he said the exact same two words.
I'm going to say we probably read the same book is probably the answer, is what I'm guessing. I don't know. I think people talk about ruthless prioritization like it's bad, like ruthless, like such a nasty word. And it's like, no. Ruthless prioritization is a beautiful thing. It's basically saying, like, I'm going to do all the things that are important to me and nothing else. How cool is that? Like, imagine being like, I'm going to eat all the foods I like, but nothing else. That's ruthless prioritization of foods. I'm going to, like, do all the things that I love. And I'm going to, like, the way I'm able to do all the things I love is by not doing any of the things I don't love. This is great.
All right, Mohak. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with us. I'm going to give you the opportunity to say any final thoughts or statements or things that inspire.
I've been really fortunate to be able to connect near directly my experience of Mahant Sai Maharaj, my experience of, like, BAPS, my experience of religion, and the values that I've gained from him, from it, back to work. Like, I feel like this incredibly direct, crisp connection that says, like, oh, I can draw a line from where I was to where I am now and say that, like, that line, the slope of that line is caused by all of this input, all of this mentorship, all this coaching, all this learning I've had from it over the years. And so if there's, like, a single sentence I'd share with everyone who's listening is, take the opportunity to connect to the same. You may not be able to draw your direct line connection, but one day I promise you will be.
Well, thank you, Mohak. We can definitely feel a connection with you today and your passion, not just with your words, but your hands and your emotions. Thank you for taking the time out today. And Mohak Shroff, Senior Vice President of Engineering at LinkedIn, thank you, and have a great day.